The first full-size 3D scan of the Titanic is showing the shipwreck in new light.
In 2025, a new deep-sea expedition returned to the Titanic with drones more advanced than any ever used before. Their goal was simple:
special technology to map the entire ship on the ocean floor and create its digital twin.
Capture the most detailed scan of the wreck in history.
That boat sank 50 or 60 years ago. Why do you care about it now?
But within hours of descent, the mission turned into a nightmare. Cameras malfunctioned, sonar readings pulsed with rhythmic noise.
The difference between Titanic sinking and not sinking are down to the fine margins of holes about the size of a piece of paper. But the problem is that those small holes are across a long length of the ship, so the floodwater comes in slowly but surely into all of those holes.
And what they recorded in the ship's lower decks forced every researcher to stop the project immediately. The Titanic was not as lifeless as they thought. The 3D resurrection of a tomb. The year 2025 began with an announcement that immediately captured Titanic's enthusiasts. A group of oceanic researchers, funded by a coalition of scientific institutions and private technology companies, declared they would launch the most advanced underwater exploration of the Titanic ever attempted. The wreck had been explored many times before, but never with this level of precision. Their new drones were unlike anything built before. Each was powered by a self-learning AI system that could make real-time adjustments to pressure, current, and visibility. They carried laser scanners, high-definition sonar, and sensors that could detect even the faintest heat or magnetic change at nearly 4,000 meters below the surface. The goal was simple at first. The team wanted to produce a full-scale digital twin of the Titanic, a complete 3D reconstruction of the ship as it currently rests on the seabed. They hoped to document its decay before the wreck disappeared entirely. The Titanic has been slowly breaking apart since it was first found in 1985. Saltwater corrosion, bacteria, and shifting sediment have eaten away at its structure for decades. However, the crew expected this mission to be predictable. They believed the biggest challenge would be equipment strain and technical errors, not anything unexplained. That expectation collapsed on the third day of the dive. The drones sent back images that showed major structural shifts in parts of the stern. Massive chunks of steel had crumbled into fine powder. Yet one section of the ship remained strangely untouched. It was a sealed first-class corridor that should have been crushed long ago. The walls stood firm, and doors appeared almost frozen in time. Engineers immediately questioned how such preservation was possible when nearby areas had nearly dissolved. As the drones continued scanning, the sensors picked up something even more disturbing. Energy readings around that corridor were inconsistent with the rest of the site. At first, the crew assumed it was a result of metallic reflection or sonar distortion, but the irregularities persisted. The frequency changed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. When sonar data was translated into sound, the researchers heard a deep, repetitive vibration. It was not the sound of machinery or movement in the water. It was slower, heavier, and mechanical in tone. The engineers labeled the phenomenon unexplained metallic interference. They tried to rule out environmental causes, but none fit. No undersea currents or geological activity could produce such consistent pulses. The data appeared to come directly from within the sealed corridor. For hours, the signal repeated at perfect intervals. It was neither random nor caused by the drone's own systems. Several crew members later described it as a metallic heartbeat echoing through the wreck. The mission had started as a preservation project, but it was clear something else was happening below the surface. The Titanic, once a silent grave, was showing signs of movement. The lead engineer decided to investigate the signal directly. The team prepared a second, more specialized drone to descend toward the source of the strange vibration. They believed they were tracing a harmless data glitch, but what they found next would destroy that assumption completely. The descent of the Odyssey drone. The second dive began just after midnight. The ocean surface was calm, but the crew on the support vessel reported a feeling of tension that no one could explain. The Odyssey 7 drone was released into the freezing water and began its descent toward the Titanic. It was the most advanced underwater machine ever built for deep-sea exploration. Its titanium body could withstand pressure equal to several thousand tons, and its sapphire-coated lens was designed to resist corrosion and scratches even in total darkness. The drone's AI-assisted navigation allowed it to react faster than any human pilot could, making micro-adjustments to stay level as it sank into the black water. For the first hour, everything was stable. Telemetry readings showed steady internal pressure, temperature, and signal strength. The operators watched the live feed on their screens as the drone passed through layers of drifting sediment and marine snow. At a depth of nearly 3,800 meters, sunlight does not exist. The drone relied entirely on its high-intensity lights and sonar imaging to navigate the endless darkness. The first glimpse of the Titanic's outline came slowly into view, a massive shadow resting silently on the seafloor. The tension on the control deck broke for a moment as the team watched the legendary wreck reappear in crisp, clear detail. But the calm did not last. As the Odyssey moved closer to the bow, the rhythmic interference returned. The sound was faint at first, then began to increase in strength. The sonar pattern showed sharp peaks and intervals that repeated every 46 seconds with absolute precision. The engineers were uneasy. They immediately checked whether another submersible was operating nearby, but no other vehicle was within several kilometers of the site. All surrounding frequencies were clear. The sound appeared to be coming from inside the Titanic itself. The data indicated that the vibration was strongest near the midsection of the ship, close to a sealed cargo compartment that no expedition had ever entered. As the drone hovered near the site, the sonar readings became increasingly erratic. The vibration was not only audible, it was also physically measurable through the hull. The Odyssey's sensors picked up subtle ripples of movement along the steel plating. The strange part was the direction. The pressure waves moved outward as though something on the inside of the wreck was pushing against the metal. The sound changed slightly, transforming from a pulse into a pattern that resembled tapping or hammering. It was steady, precise, and deliberate. The operators fell silent as they listened through the monitors. One technician described it as the sound of someone trapped behind a wall. Every scan confirmed the same point of origin, deep inside the sealed cargo bay, far beyond the reach of any natural current or known biological activity. The Titanic was not completely silent anymore. Something inside it was moving, and it was striking the metal from within. The Odyssey's cameras turned toward the section where the vibration was strongest. As it advanced closer, the live feed captured something that defied all previous engineering reports and sent immediate shock through the control room. The breach that should not exist. The Odyssey 7's AI mapping system displayed a tear in the Titanic's inner bulkhead, near what historical blueprints identified as a sealed storage compartment. This section of the ship was supposed to be completely intact. No previous scan, expedition, or submersible had ever documented a break in that area. The engineers initially assumed the gap was a product of collapse or metal fatigue, but the moment the high-definition feed focused on the structure, every assumption began to fall apart. The hole was massive, about 2 meters wide, and the shape was entirely wrong for natural decay. The edges were cleanly curved, as if the steel had been pressed outward under tremendous internal force. The metal was bent away from the inside of the compartment, not inward as would happen with a collapse. Engineers on the surface immediately noted that trapped gases or implosions cause inward compression. This tear was the opposite. The ship had been forced open from within. One of the metallurgists reviewing the live feed froze the image and zoomed in. The steel edges were not jagged or crumbled. They were smooth and polished, showing clear signs of friction and grinding, not corrosion. Corrosion leaves the metal thin, uneven, and flaked. These edges looked as if they had been physically pushed or rubbed apart. The discovery contradicted everything known about the Titanic's condition. For over a century, the wreck had been considered a silent, lifeless tomb. There was no explanation for why solid steel, buried under 12,500 feet of ocean pressure, would rupture outward like this. As the drone adjusted its position, its lights illuminated the area surrounding the breach. What it revealed next was even more disturbing. Thick clusters of strange biological growths covered the metal. At first, they appeared to be ordinary rusticles, stalactite-like colonies of bacteria that feed on iron, but the shape and texture were wrong. These growths were denser and smoother, and they reflected the drone's light with a dull shimmer. When the AI enhanced the image, faint pulses of blue-green light could be seen moving across their surface. They were emitting bioluminescence. The operator increased the brightness, and that's when something even more unsettling occurred. Several of the growths seemed to recoil, as though they were reacting to the sudden illumination. It was a subtle movement, but it was visible. The clusters shifted slightly back into the darkness, contracting like living tissue. The control room went silent as the crew watched in disbelief. The AI system immediately flagged the footage as unknown organic matter. It activated continuous recording mode and began transmitting multiple sensor readings to capture the anomaly in full detail. The biologists on the team debated cutting the video feed, fearing contamination or misinterpretation, but the project director decided to keep recording. They needed evidence of whatever they had just uncovered. It was clear that the Titanic was no longer just a decaying wreck. It was hosting something alive, and that life was behaving in ways no known deep-sea organism should. The rhythmic metallic pulse that had guided them to this point began again, louder this time, echoing through the hull and shaking the drone's audio sensors. It came from deep within the breach. The Odyssey slowly rotated its lights toward the opening, preparing to enter. What it captured next would erase any idea that this was a simple structural failure. Inside the sealed corridor. According to the Titanic's original blueprints, this area was supposed to be a sealed first-class corridor, crushed beyond recognition when the ship broke apart during its descent to the ocean floor. Yet what the drone entered looked almost untouched by time. The interior layout was still visible, and parts of the walls and decorative moldings could be clearly recognized. Even the framework of doors remained standing, leaning slightly, but intact. The corridor stretched forward into the darkness, illuminated only by the drone's harsh white lights. Every surface was covered in a thick layer of pale sediment, so dense it looked like fine ash from a fire. The moment the drone moved forward, the current from its propellers disturbed the sediment and sent clouds of white dust into the water. Visibility dropped instantly, giving the video feed an eerie, fog-like haze. It felt less like exploring a shipwreck, and more like walking through a burned hallway in slow motion. Then the sound returned. The metallic tapping that had drawn the team this far became louder, sharper, and perfectly rhythmic. It echoed down the corridor, bouncing off the walls in timed intervals. The pattern repeated every 46 seconds, just as before. It no longer sounded like random interference. It sounded deliberate, like someone or something was producing it from further inside. The temperature readings suddenly began to climb. The sensors registered a 2°C increase in a matter of seconds. That should not have been possible in an environment this deep, where temperatures remain near freezing. The data implied that some type of exothermic chemical or biological reaction was occurring nearby. The AI flagged it as anomalous heat source and began collecting environmental data to confirm it. As the Odyssey advanced, its lights reflected off scattered debris. Most of the surfaces were dull, but a few gave off sharp metallic glints. The drone adjusted its camera angle and zoomed in on a small rectangular shape wedged between fragments of wood and a collapsed wall panel. It looked unnatural against the otherwise decayed background. When the focus sharpened, the team could see what it was: an intact leather-bound book. The object was only partially buried in sediment, and the cover was still sealed. The AI performed a visual analysis and identified it as an early 20th century journal. The readings matched a material consistent with tanned leather, preserved by the cold and lack of oxygen. As the drone's retrieval arm extended to grasp it, the sonar feed detected something new. Vibrations rippled through the corridor floor, short, uneven, and distinct from the previous tapping pattern. They resembled the heavy, uneven rhythm of steps. The motion sensors registered a faint shadow moving at the edge of the frame. It passed behind a doorway and vanished. The operators on the surface froze. One of them whispered that the movement had to be sediment falling, but the shape on screen was upright and deliberate. The Odyssey's lights flickered for several seconds as interference intensified. The team immediately issued a command to reverse the drone's position and retreat toward the breach. The AI prioritized extraction mode and backed out of the corridor while maintaining a lock on the journal. Once the drone reached a safe distance, the crew recovered the book using a containment pod. The mission data confirmed that whatever was moving inside that corridor was still active after the drone left. The Odyssey's discovery should have ended with a preserved artifact, but when the journal was opened and scanned aboard the research vessel, its contents revealed something far more horrifying than any physical anomaly on the wreck. The journal and the signal connection. Back on the research vessel, the recovered journal was immediately sealed in a sterile chamber to prevent contamination. The leather cover was fragile, but still intact. It bore no nameplate, but watermarks on the inner lining dated it to 1912, matching the Titanic's final voyage. The pages were fused together from decades of compression, but the team used hyperspectral imaging to recover the ink without physically opening the book. This technology reads chemical residues of ink that remain trapped within fibers, even after water exposure. Line by line, the writing slowly reappeared on the digital monitor. Most of the early entries were typical of a first-class passenger. The author described the ship's elegance, the food, and the calmness of the Atlantic, But the tone of the entries changed drastically near the final pages. The handwriting became uneven and rushed, as if written under stress or in low light. The sentences were incomplete, with some words scrawled over others. The last few pages contained no readable sentences at all, only a repeating sequence of short and long ink strokes. At first, the team thought it was damage or random smears, but one of the analysts recognized a pattern. The markings resembled Morse code. When the pattern was translated, the results shocked everyone in the room. The code corresponded to a repeating pulse that matched the same 46-second rhythm recorded by the sonar on the last dive. The sequence was too precise to be coincidence. The analysts checked it multiple times, comparing it with the sonar data. The match was exact to the millisecond. Engineers immediately tried to explain it scientifically. Some suggested that the rhythmic signal could have been caused by natural metal expansion, hull stress, or the vibration of rustical colonies under shifting pressure. These were plausible at first glance, but mathematical modeling eliminated them one by one. None of these factors could maintain a perfectly timed interval for hours without variation. The sonar pulse, like the pattern in the journal, was steady, controlled, and intentional. As the team cross-referenced both datasets, one chilling line from the journal became clear on screen. It read simply, "Still knocking." The date below it was partially smeared, but the ink composition matched the last recorded day before the Titanic disappeared from the surface. The meaning was unclear, but the phrase carried a horrifying implication when viewed alongside the rhythmic signals still echoing from the wreck. The research AI was then instructed to analyze all sonar and vibration data again, isolating the source of the pulse. The model traced it to a precise location directly below the cargo deck, beneath the same breach the Odyssey had entered. This was an area long assumed to be filled with collapsed machinery and coal residue, a place no previous expedition had considered important. The evidence suggested that the unknown biological growths and the rhythmic signal might be connected. The signal had not stopped once during the entire mission, maintaining perfect continuity, as if it were still being transmitted in real time. This was no residual echo from metal strain. It was an active source, buried beneath the cargo deck. To confirm the possibility of a living or mechanical origin, the team had no choice but to send the Odyssey back down for a focused survey of the lower cargo section, unaware that what waited there would break every assumption they had left. The pale shape and the anomaly beneath. The Odyssey's third descent began under strict protocol. The drone was equipped with reinforced signal shielding and an upgraded power core to withstand interference. The crew launched it with full awareness that the last dive had recorded unexplained biological activity and continuous mechanical pulses. Despite unease across the deck, the team pushed forward, driven by the need to confirm whether the signal and the strange organic material were connected. Once again, the Odyssey dropped through the dark layers of the North Atlantic. The sea grew colder, the light disappeared, and the pressure mounted to levels that would crush any human vessel. The live feed flickered as the drone passed the Titanic's upper decks and moved toward the lower cargo section beneath the main hull. This area had never been entered before. It was believed to contain nothing more than broken machinery, rust, and compacted coal dust. Visibility fell to almost nothing. Fine silt and thick darkness swallowed the drone's beams. The AI switched to thermal contrast imaging, a method that detects temperature differences instead of light. The screen came alive with distorted shapes and faint heat signatures. The readings made no sense. Several zones inside the hull registered 2 to 3 degrees warmer than the surrounding environment. That difference was impossible at this depth. Something within the wreck was generating heat. The drone advanced toward the largest anomaly, positioned behind a collapsed section of bulkhead. The sonar outline showed a mass roughly the size of a small car. When the Odyssey's light beams finally reached it, the control room fell completely silent. The surface of the object was pale, smooth, and faintly reflective. It did not resemble metal or rock. Under closer inspection, the texture looked disturbingly similar to skin. It was thin, stretched, and covered in a pattern of metallic filaments that ran like veins across its surface. Without warning, the structure moved. It contracted inward, then expanded again, stirring up a cloud of sediment that momentarily blinded the cameras. The motion was slow but coordinated. It was not drifting with currents, it was moving with purpose. The sensors recorded pressure fluctuations in sync with the motion, rising and falling at intervals identical to the 46-second rhythm detected earlier. Every reading pointed to the same conclusion. The object was breathing. The Odyssey's cameras refocused, zooming in on a series of dark ridges that ran along the object's side. The AI identified surface clusters matching the same biological formations found near the earlier breach, dense, luminous growths that pulsed with faint light. It was as if the rusticle-like organisms on the corridor walls were part of this larger body, sharing the same living structure. The engineers realized that what they had thought were isolated colonies might be extensions of something much larger, feeding on and merging with the ship itself. As the drone shifted its angle, one of its cameras captured a clear view of a long, jointed extension sliding slowly across the Titanic's hull. Its surface matched the same pale, vein-patterned material seen earlier, confirming it was part of the same iron-consuming organism. When the light struck it directly, the extension reacted violently, releasing a burst of particulate matter and electromagnetic discharge. The surge overloaded the drone's systems, and within seconds, all communication was lost. Attempts to re-establish the signal failed. When the recovery submersible was later sent to retrieve the drone, it confirmed the cause. The drone's metal frame was burned and partially fused with a translucent organic residue, showing that the limb had released a powerful electrical discharge that destroyed the Odyssey the moment it was exposed. Samples were collected and sealed in containment tubes for immediate laboratory study. The substance did not match any known marine organism or corrosion byproduct. The analysis of that residue would soon confirm the crew's worst fears. What scientists discovered under the microscope was so disturbing that the entire project was shut down within weeks, and every file connected to the Odyssey mission was locked under restricted access. The forbidden truth beneath the ship. The residue taken from the Odyssey's damaged frame was sent to 3 separate laboratories for independent analysis. Each team used different methods to prevent bias or contamination. What they discovered left all of them unsettled. Under microscopic and chemical examination, the residue showed both metallic and biological traits. It contained traces of decayed iron, mixed with protein structures, amino acids, and fragments of active bacterial DNA. The DNA sequences did not match any known organism in scientific databases. It was something completely new, capable of surviving pressures and temperatures found only in the deepest parts of the ocean. When a controlled sample was exposed to light and oxygen, its behavior changed. Instead of decaying, it began to move. The material produced faint electrical charges that caused its filaments to twist and reconnect. Under laboratory cameras, the residue slowly reorganized itself into web-like strands. These filaments were both metallic and organic, conducting small electrical currents along their surface. This meant the substance was not just alive, but was able to use metal as part of its living structure. Marine biologists and metallurgists reviewing the results concluded that the residue came from a living iron-consuming organism. It appeared to feed on corroded steel, converting it into part of its own tissue. Over decades, this organism had likely spread throughout the Titanic, consuming the ship while reinforcing its own body with metallic elements. The result was a hybrid structure of decaying ship and living material, bound together in one system. This theory finally explained several long-standing mysteries about the wreck, including the unnatural outward tears in the hull. The metal had not failed from pressure or corrosion. It had been metabolized from within by a biological entity capable of digesting iron. Further tests revealed another disturbing fact. The organism reacted to rhythmic vibration frequencies. When laboratory speakers played recordings of the 46-second sonar pulse from the earlier dive, the residue emitted faint electrical signals in sync with the rhythm. It was a biological response, suggesting that the vibration served as a kind of trigger or communication pattern. This meant the deep tapping detected inside the wreck was not random noise. It was a pulse produced or echoed by the living colonies integrated into the Titanic's structure. After reviewing the results, the research directors ordered all ongoing missions to be suspended immediately. They feared the organism could adapt to new environments or spread if brought to the surface. To avoid ecological contamination, all samples were locked in isolation chambers. The official report to the public mentioned only unresolved data anomalies, omitting any reference to biological activity. Internal documents painted a far darker picture. Memos described the site as unstable and self-sustaining, meaning the Titanic was no longer a static ruin, but part of a continuing biological system feeding on its own metal. The final line in the confidential mission log summarized the situation without speculation. It read simply, "Activity persists. Recommend full containment perimeter." The statement implied that the process had not stopped. Subsequent deep-sea monitoring confirmed that the rhythmic pulse continued long after the mission ended. The frequency shifted slightly eastward, suggesting that parts of the organism were still active and possibly expanding along the seabed. Experts warned that if it continued to adapt, it could colonize nearby metal wreckage or deep-sea infrastructure. For now, the site remains under restricted access, marked on navigation systems only as a hazard zone. What do you think about this organism found on the Titanic? Comment down below.